In this video, I showed the drafting, cutting and sewing process for this lovely shirt. It has button loops, exaggerated sleeves, collar, and I created fullness along the bust region. You're welcome to Kema Freak. My name is Kemi Omorugbe. For this tutorial, I'll be making use of the full-scale basic bodice block. That is the center front, and I have the neckline right there, 3 inches by 3 inches. Then the shoulder, armhole, chest line, the bust line, the under bust line, the waist line, and the hip line. I've also gone ahead to input the circumferences divided by 4, the bust circumference and the waist circumference divided by 4, then the hip circumference divided by 4. I've also positioned my dart. I used the bust span of 8 inches divided by 2. So rather than using the regular 1 inch wide dart, I'm making use of a 2 inches wide dart here. So because I made use of 2 inches there, I'm going to be extending the waistline by that 2 inches to make up for that shortage. Then I'll connect it to the measurement I took on the chest line, and I'll connect it straight to the hip line, and then we have our full scale basic bodice block right here. I raised the side of the pattern by 1 inch along the hip line, and that way I created a curve. So we'll be having a curvy hem rather than a straight hem. Next, I'll go ahead to input the bust dart. So I measured 2 inches downward from the bust line, and I connected the dart right to the bust point. Okay, so the 2 inches is the difference between the front and the back half length. Now I'll be drafting the back pattern, and I started by drawing out the top margin for this pattern, and I also drew out a margin at the side. Although this outfit won't have a zip at the center back, but I still need that for shaping, so I just drew out a margin 1 inch wide. So next I'm inputting the back half length, which is 2 inches smaller than what I used for the front half length. Note that the measurement from the waist to the hip line is the same thing for both the back and front. The only difference is the shoulder to the waist measurement. If you check out our tutorial on how to draft a full scale basic bodice block on my channel, you'll understand this completely. So I've gone ahead now to draw out the waistline and the hip line, and I'll be working at the top part of the pattern, marking out the neckline of 3 inches by 1 inch. Then I'll proceed to mark the shoulder width divided by 2, which I have at 7.5 inches right there, where I'll be dropping the shoulder by 1 inch for the back. So next I'll go ahead to add 1 inch to what I marked out for the shoulder width, so that makes it 8 inches from the top of the pattern, and I'll also mark out the shoulder width there, 7 inches. Now we have the armhole line and the chest line. Once again, on the chest line, I'll mark the bust circumference divided by 4 and input my measurement right there. Then I'll also take the waist circumference and the hip circumferences divided by 2 and mark it on their corresponding lines. Now I'll be connecting all of these markings to make the sides same for the back pattern. Just like I did for the front pattern, I'm raising the hip line by 1 inch to make the line curvy, sort of. And now I'll proceed to mark the dart position for the back. I also use the bust span here, so I'm marking 4 inches from the center back, and I'm drawing out the dart line. I extended it to the chest line, then further extended it to the middle of the shoulder line, so that we'll have a shoulder princess dart. Okay, so my dart, I'm extending my dart from the chest line to the waistline, and the waistline is just a 1 inch wide dart, unlike what I did on the front pattern. And for the lower waist dart, I'm extending it just about 3 inches above the hip line. So at the center back, I decided to tighten the back a little bit by 1/2 inch, and so that we need a replacement at the waistline. Then I proceeded to mark out the armhole curve, which I initially forgot that I was yet to do. Now I'm ready to cut out this pattern. In doing that, I'll be adding 1 inch allowance to the side and to the hem, and 1/2 inch on every other part of this pattern. Now I will be separating this pattern into panels, thereby cutting off the dart, the back dart. And in doing this, that means when I'm transferring this to fabric, I still need to add 1/2 inch allowance along that dart line for each of this panel. Remember, we have all our allowances on every other side ready. This is just the only part we'll be adding allowance on fabric. So I'll set this aside so we can further work on the front pattern. Welcome back, front pattern. This is the original plan for this outfit, and you can see we have a cup right there. So it's not padded, but it's a cup all the same, and that will mean separating the cup from the main piece. So, but let's first label this line. We have the bust line, the under bust line, the waistline, and the hip line right there. So that way, when I call any line, you know the exact line I'm referring to. So I'll be connecting the base of the waist dart to the bust line along the center front. So initially I marked 1/2 inch inward, but you'll see later that I corrected this and connected it to the center. It's not like this is wrong, but it just wasn't what I was going for. So I created a cup right there, something similar to what we do on corset, guys. So now I want to close up the waist dart so that I can create the other side of the cup. That's the reason why I splitted open the dart line, and I'll be transferring the bust dart. So once that is done, I can then draw the other side of this cup. So I just marked 2 inches inward on the chest line, 2 inches inward right there, and I'll be connecting that dot to the waistline using my curve. So this was the correction I was talking about. I eventually corrected it and connected my cup to the center front, exactly the center front. So, and here is the other side of the cup. Now I can go ahead to cut off the dart and separate all the pieces of this pattern. Don't forget to label your patterns always, so that way you don't get them mixed up. Now here are the 3 pieces for the front pattern, and what I'll do with this cup part is to actually plait together. So you have this, you can see how it looks. Okay, I decided to add more fullness to this pattern just so that by the time I'm pleating I can have a larger pleat, and I'll be using slash and spread techniques, and I just drew a line from the bust point to the shoulder and spread open the dart that way. without spreading the shoulder part so that it remains the same. And then I separated the bust point by 1.5 inches, so that way the fullness has just increased. So now go ahead to cut off the excess papers I have right there. Once again, we have this, and this. Okay, and what I'll do eventually will be to pleat. You can pleat in, pleat out, or you just make gathers. Okay, so before I continue, I'll go ahead to measure around the armhole curve just so that I can know what to do with my sleeve. Guys, we're making an exaggerated sleeve using a 180-degree flare. Please check out the full tutorial on how to make different degrees of flare on this channel. I'll put a link in the description box. So now I have my fabric folded into 4 actually, but I need it folded into 2 for a sleeve. But because I'm making 2 sleeves, I folded it into 4 so that way I can get 2 sleeves. So once you measure around the armhole curve, because that was just for the front, I got 10 inches, then I multiplied it by 2 because I will need my sleeve to extend to the back, right? So I make use of 20 inches, but I didn't just make use of 20 inches, I added additional 10 to 20 inches ish, I can't remember really, to that value, and I used it as my radius. So I divided that value by 3.14. Go watch the tutorial on how to create different degrees of circular flares. So I've marked out the inner circle there using measurement of my radius, and what I'm doing now is marking out the length of the sleeve. I went for a length of about 21 inches, and once I was done marking that length from the inner circle, I just connected all my dots together and proceeded to cut out the sleeve. For this shirt, I made use of 3 yards of fabric, and the sleeve took an entire 2 yards. Yeah, you heard me right. So I splitted open the closed end right there so that I can have 2 separate sleeves, and that's it with the sleeve really. Now for the back pattern, because I already have my allowances apart from the allowance on the dart line, I'm not adding any extra allowance to the side, the armhole, the shoulder, or to the hem. But then along this dart line, I'm adding half an inch seam allowance. The same thing goes for the other panel of the back piece. Once I was done cutting, I went ahead to put a notch on the chest line and the waistline. I did the same thing for the other panel. Now here is the front piece which I have transferred to fabric. I have half an inch allowance everywhere here and 1 inch on the side seam allowance, and the hem, every other part there has half an inch allowance. Once that was done, I notched along the waistline. This will come in handy when I'm sewing the 2 pieces together. So for this cup, I added half an inch all around the cup at the armhole, the neckline, and the shoulder line right there. And I also notched the edges of this my spread, so I'll just know where to pleat when it's time to pleat. Okay, Here is our exaggerated half circle sleeve, which is currently on fold. I have the both pieces right here. When you open it up, this is what you have. I'll be starting the sewing process by sewing the two panels for the back together by half an inch. I will also proceed to join the center back of one side to the other, still by half an inch. Now here's what I have, and I'll proceed to give this a good press. Then I'll top stitch from the right side, okay, by a quarter of an inch. This seam is going to be visible, so it's necessary that it's neat and straight. Okay, now I'll just set this aside so we can do some work on the front piece. This is the cup. Remember the notches I added, which indicates the edges of our spread on the pattern. Okay, here we'll have it, these two edges right there. So I'll fold them over the other so that I can get the middle point. That's the middle point between the two notches right there. Then I'll create a notch just there to indicate that center. So from that point onward, I'll be creating pleats on the fabric like so. This I will hold down using my pins. Then I will go sew a tiny seam just to hold it in place. I'll do the same thing for the other cup. Done that, the next thing I'll be doing will be to sew the side fronts and the center front panels together. I'll be attaching the two pieces together by half an inch. So while doing that, my notch along the waistline will help me position it correctly, and I'll just go ahead and sew by half an inch. Here we have it, just like I did for the front piece. I'll be overlocking the edge of the seam allowance and then top stitching from the right side by a quarter of an inch, a very neat seam. Once that is done, this is what you will have. You can see this is the wrong side actually. So for the pleats on the cup, it could be inward or an outward pleat. It depends on what you want. So now I'm going to sew these two pieces together, right side facing each other. I'll position the center of the pleat at that center line. Then I'll sew the cup onto the lower part of the shirt by half an inch. Before doing that, you may need to hold these two pieces together with pins so that it helps them stay put while you sew. I have sewn the cups onto the lower part of the shirt. I also proceeded to attach the front and back piece together along the shoulder line. I sew by half an inch. Now it's time to fix the placket. Okay, I have two plackets here. This one is 2 inches wide and I folded half an inch on both sides, while the other one is 3 inches wide. I folded half an inch on both sides and then further folded the remaining 2 inches. I hope that makes sense. So now I'll be attaching one on one side and the other on the other side, obviously. For the two pieces I just showed you, I ironed in fusible interfacing. This will help the placket stay firm on the shirt. So I picked up the one that was 3 inches wide. I will first sew it onto the shirt by half an inch, then turn it around, close it up with the other side, then top stitch on it this way. So, and this is what we have. I did that, and now I'll pick up the other side, which will be treating quite differently. I have this loop here for buttons and I've cut them into strips about 2 inches long. So I will be pinning each of these on the shirts, positioning them evenly. I use 2 inches. I place them 2 inches apart for this shirt. So I'm folding each strip into 2 and holding it down on the shirt. This is what I have once that process is done. Now pick the other piece of the placket, the one that is 2 inches wide. Okay, I eventually reduced this to 1.5 inches because it just made more sense that way. So first I'll be sewing the first half an inch, then I'll turn it around, then top stitch. So if I had top stitched on this, I would have had like a 1 inch wide seam that way. So that was why I reduced it to half an inch, and this is what I have on that side of things. It looks pretty. I can now go ahead to fix a collar on this shirt. Please refer to the video on shirt collar making. It is very easy to understand. So here I have mine. My collar is fixed already, and the next thing I'll be doing will be to sew the side seams. So I'm placing the front over the back piece, right side facing each other, and I'll sew in the 1 inch seam allowance along the side. I'll do the same thing for the other side of the shirt. So once that is done, I will also go ahead to sew the side seam of the sleeve. You can make it half an inch, it doesn't matter, because we have excess fabric here which will be pleating on the armhole curve of the shirt. Once I'm done with that, I'll go ahead to attach the sleeve on the armhole. So remember I said we have excess. I'll be pleating that excess along the shoulder part of the armhole curve. Okay, so we're not going to have sleeve so we're not going to have pleats everywhere. It will just be on the upper part of the sleeve. I'll be sewing the sleeve onto the shirt by half an inch. Here we have it. I'm done attaching the sleeve onto the shirt, and this is what we have. So the next thing I'll be doing will be to attach elastic onto the lower end of the sleeve. I'll just pick up my elastic and measure my my wrist circumference, and then I'll cut out 2 of that for each of the sleeve. Then I'll be sewing the hem of the sleeve by 1 inch. Then I'll pass the elastic strip through it. So this is what I'm trying to describe basically. Here we have our shirt. I proceeded to attach buttons on it and also to sew in the hem of the shirt. Hold on, just check out the fit on me. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, drop a comment in the comment section, let me know what you think about this shirt and if you give this a try. Thank you for watching this far. So see you in the next video.